LoveLore Library. Chapter 362 Stalking. It seems that we can only wait until night. The leader of these refugees must know something, right? Informant number 1 added. Yes, well, retreat immediately after we know who it is. This refugee camp is just depressing. Informant number 2 nodded in agreement. It was soon night, but the refugees only started to move after the moonlight disappeared. The informants saw this large group of people running around the mountains to Xianghe village. The two of them looked at each other and understood that they were being looked down on or were not trusted. Nevertheless, they quietly chased after them. Although the night was dark, the patrol team found the informants and quickly determined their whereabouts. However, they knew many people were guarding the manor, so they did not go over. Instead, they sent someone to inform the manor secretly. As such, by the time the group of refugees made a detour to the manor had already received the news and was quietly lying in ambush nearby. The refugees didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Instead, when they saw the rows of cattle and sheep pens in the village, their eyes lit up with greed. They didn't need to go hungry with all these cattle and sheep. Everyone, be careful when we go down. There will definitely be traps. At this moment, someone whispered. Soon, the same cautionary whisper reached the ears of the two informants after passing around. The two looked at each other, and pinpointed the person standing at the front. However, because the sky was too dark, they could only see a rough outline. Soon, the group of refugees quickly went down the mountains. Although the one scouting the way in front used a stick to detect trenches, he did not expect their extraordinary width. Therefore, he took a step forward and fell directly into the trench. He immediately screamed. "Idiot!" The leader cursed. "Everyone, rush over. We have the numbers, so there's no need to be afraid. Otherwise, it'll be too late when the people in the manor react." After ordering that, he took a few steps back and quickly ran ahead. With one vigorous jump, he crossed the 6-foot-wide trench. When the others heard this, they went all out for the meat dangling before them. In the end, only a few timid people remained in the same place. When the leader saw this, he waved his hand and let them go back. He led the others aside and said, "Remember, after you go in, release all the cattle and sheep and create chaos. Then, each of you will lead a cattle or a sheep and rush to the exit." "Got it, Brother Peng." "Well, listen to you," someone said excitedly. "Are you looking to die? Go." When the leader heard him call out his name, he immediately threatened the person with a face full of killing intent. However, the refugees couldn't care less about his attitude. Instead, they split up and rushed to the cattle and sheep pens. As for the leader, Brother Peng, he quietly left the crowd and ran toward the well at the foot of the mountains. Informant number 1 and informant number 2 stayed in place for a moment, and they quietly followed Brother Peng. Just as they approached, they realized Brother Peng had taken something out of a bag. Just as he was about to open the paper bag, an arrow suddenly shot from the side, directly aiming for Brother Peng's head. Brother Peng was startled and dodged it with a backflip. However, more arrows were shot at him one after another until he lost the ability to resist. At the same time, the screams of the refugees rang out one after another. The entire village was filled with screams like hell on earth, making one's hair stand on end. The two informants were so scared that their legs went soft. Just as they were about to escape, someone suddenly walked over and said, "Stop, or I'll kill you without mercy." Don't. We're not the bad guys." Informant number 1 immediately raised his hand. Informant number 2 also raised his hand. Very quickly, the two of them were tied up. Chapter 363 Interrogation 1. At the same time, Brother Peng was also carried to the tiny house that Uncle Nian had lived in before. He was locked up in the storeroom. Sun Hongliang walked up to informant number 1 and informant number 2 and asked, "Who are you? You're with that guy just now." "No, no, no." Informant number 2 shook his head. After realizing Brother Peng was being carried away, he replied, "We're Constable Zhang's informers. He was the one who asked us to mix with the refugees. We were there to check if someone stirred up trouble among the refugees." Yes, it's that person, Brother Peng, who led the way for the refugees. He also urged the refugees to come and steal the cattle and sheep. He even said that they would enter the mountains after taking them. Also, we just saw him trying to spike your well. Informant number 1 added. Yes, it's a small medicine paper bag, but we don't know what medicine it is. Informant number 2 echoed. Constable Zhang's men. He'll have to inconvenience you two for one night, then. We'll let you go after we've verified the truth tomorrow. Sun Hongliang hesitated momentarily, then handed them over to Uncle Nian with a bow and arrow. That's right, the arrows were shot by him, and it was also one of his special skills. It was meant to be used to kill the huge beasts coming down from the mountains. When Uncle Nian saw this, he dragged them to the cowshed and tied them to a pillar. Only then did informant number 1 realize that the refugees were all holding their heads and constantly screaming. There were also others at the side tied up like animals. "Uncle, did you already know they were coming?" he asked Uncle Nian. "There are so many cattle and sheep in the village. Do you think we'll be unprepared?" The old man laughed coldly. "That's true." Informant number 1 chuckled and didn't say anything else. After all the refugees were tied up and gathered together, Sun Hongliang came forward and said, 111 give you a chance to redeem yourselves. Otherwise, you'll have to do as Lord Bai ordered and send you to the army. When he finished speaking, someone shouted rudely, "Cut the crap. If you want to send us the army, so be it. At least I won't starve to death." Sun Hongliang ignored him and turned to the others, "So, do you all have the same idea? If so, 111 fulfill your wish tomorrow." The refugees muttered to themselves, but most didn't want to go when they thought about the battlefield's cruelty. "Just tell us what you want to know," someone shouted. "We'll tell you everything we know." "All right. I'll release one person for each question you answer. Think about it carefully." Sun Hongliang asked, "Was it Brother Peng who told you to come over tonight to steal the livestock?" "Yes, he said there was food in the mountains, so we came to this area. But we have turned the mountain upside down these past few days, and there is nothing except tree bark and leaves." Later, when we complained to him, he said that there were a lot of cattle and sheep here, so we came. Sun Hongliang pointed at him, and someone immediately took him out. Seeing this, the others became anxious, and they all perked up their ears to listen to the next question. Sun Hongliang nodded in satisfaction. "Next, when did Brother Peng start following you guys, or has he always been with you guys?" I know. He only got together with us after the snowstorm. He said the snowstorm destroyed his house, so he became a refugee. The man was immediately taken out after he finished speaking. Then, besides bringing you here, did he say anything else? Or did he have a family? Sun Hongliang asked. Chapter 364 Interrogation 2, about his family. "Oh, he has a wife and a son, but I feel like they're terrified of him." He also said that Dongyang Manor had collected a lot of food, but the third prince had refused to distribute it to the refugees and kept it all for himself. Yes. He also said that the third prince is cold and ruthless. He doesn't put us commoners in his eyes at all. Sun Hongliang's eyes flashed with a cold glint as he listened to their denouncement of the third prince. At the same time, he also understood that Brother Peng was most likely a spy sent by the first or fourth prince. He raised his hand and said, "That's enough. Shut up. Have you all even met the third prince? You're just listening to rumor and don't even know you've been used. If it's really as you all said, that he doesn't give any grain to the commoners, do you think the emperor will let him off?" Sun Hongliang hesitated momentarily before saying, "I'm not afraid to tell you that we did harvest some white sweet potatoes last year, but only about 300 acres of land were harvested. How long will it last if we distribute it as food? However, how many people will we save if we replant them? We have to look at the long term. Because these things could be found out with just a little inquiry, it was better to say them openly and cut off the root of those spreading rumors." "Then why do the people of Shangha village get the sweet potatoes?" someone asked. "Right, one heard that they've never gone hungry before." "Why?" "That's because the sweet potatoes were initially grown by the people of Shangha village. We can't just let them starve to death after they gave us the seeds. Besides, the amount left behind would be enough for them to eat half full. If my guess is correct, most of them are also struggling to hold on. Otherwise, why would so few wild vegetables be on the mountains? That's because they've all been taken by the nearby villagers." When the escapees heard this, they couldn't help but mumble silently. They were familiar with the scenery in the mountains. Besides the tree bark and leaves, all the wild vegetables that could be eaten had been picked. They thought about the villagers he had seen in the past 2 days. Although they weren't starving like them, these villagers didn't look too good either. Some of them even looked like they were about to die. Sun Hongliang heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that these refugees had listened to him. After that, he got some people to bring some insect repellent and put them under guard. He then returned to his room and instructed everyone to guard the manor. At daybreak, he found Bai Jingping and told him about the matter. After a moment of silence, Bai Jingping ordered the soldiers to bring Brother Peng's wife and children over from the refugees. After the mother and son entered the room, Sun Hongliang and Bai Jingping sized them up. Seeing that the mother and son were so hungry that they looked weak, they exchanged glances and made a guess. "You guys are Brother Peng's wife and son?" Sun Hongliang asked with a frown. When the mother and son heard the words Brother Peng, they were so frightened that they immediately hugged each other and shivered, as if someone was going to eat them up. When Bai Jingping saw this, he narrowed his eyes and said to the officer beside him, "Give the child a thorough examination and see if there are any injuries on them." "Yes." The officer was stunned momentarily, and then he took the child over. Seeing this, the little boy immediately burst into tears. His mother wanted to resist, but Sun Hongliang stopped her and said, "Brother Peng is now in our hands, and he'll never come back. We're giving you a chance to prove your innocence, so don't be ungrateful." Chapter 365 A fake couple. Miss, don't be afraid. We have no ill intentions towards you and your child. We just want to investigate the man, Brother Peng. Bai Jingping tried his best to speak as gently as possible. When the woman heard this, she finally looked up at them. Seeing Bai Jingping look at her sincerely, she did not make things difficult for the children. She immediately relaxed and started to cry. However, the mother and son only cried loudly, but both didn't intend to open their mouths. "Where are you from? Is there anyone else in your family?" Bai Jingping asked, looking pensive. The woman shook her head and began to cry. "Your voices?" Bai Jingping probed. "Oh. The woman opened her mouth and pointed at her mouth, shaking her head. "You were drugged and muted," Sun Hongliang exclaimed. The woman nodded repeatedly, and her tears started to fall like beads from a broken necklace. "Animal." Bai Jingping cursed angrily. "So, you're not husband and wife anymore?" The woman shook her head and pointed at the boy, waving her hand to indicate he was not her son. When Bai Jingping saw this, he had his men release the child and asked, "If you have anything to say, just say it. We will definitely seek justice for you." The woman spoke and gestured for a long time, but no one understood her. However, the little boy grabbed the soldier's hand and pulled him out. The officer glanced at Bai Jingping, who nodded and followed them out. By the time they reached the outside, the refugees had already gathered at the foot of the mountain and were in a standoff with the soldiers and patrols, each facing off at either side of a river. Bai Jingping stepped forward. "What's going on?" he asked. "Are you people planning to rebel?" When the refugees heard about being accused of rebellion, they immediately quieted down. They knew rebellion was a serious crime that would sentence 9 generations of their families to death. They did not dare to bear such a serious crime. Seeing this, Bai Jingping heaved a sigh of relief. It was fine as long as they still had this fear. "If you have something to discuss, send 2 representatives over," he said. "Gathering here and making trouble won't solve the problem. Your words sound nice, but can we return if we go there? Our request is simple, let them go." The one standing at the front raised his hand and said, "Let them go." "Let who go?" Bai Jingping asked in return. "Of course, Brother Peng and his group." "What are you saying? One haven't seen him yet, so how can I let him go?" "You've never seen it, but he has." The man pointed at Sun Hongliang after he finished speaking. "So, you know what they did last night?" Sun Hongliang laughed. "So what if we know? You guys have so many cattle and sheep and don't even care about our lives. So what's the problem if we do it ourselves?" "What are you saying? Is that yours? What you're doing is plain robbery. What right do you have to not care about our lives? I know that the manor belongs to General Zhou, who is the 3rd prince's cousin. What's he doing? He's not benevolent with his massive wealth and does not regard human lives. Not benevolent with his wealth and disregard human lives. It looks like you've been to school. So, you should know about decency, justice, and honor. I've never seen anyone give such an excellent excuse for robbery. Why don't you say that you're the emperor and everyone in the country is under your command? Robbery is justice to you, huh? I'm not afraid to tell you that the cattle and sheep in the village are the seeds that were left behind. They are the future hope of our Ming dynasty." Chapter 366 by 1. If people can't live, why should we keep animals? The man turned his head and shouted. "That's right, the most important thing for us now is to stay alive. If we're dead, what's the point of keeping those animals?" Someone immediately chimed in. "Yes, hurry up and kill all the cattle and sheep. We've been hungry for days. Why don't you let us eat if there's something to eat?" "That's right. Isn't the 3rd prince a member of the royal family? In such a disastrous year, shouldn't he be helping us refugees? Who said that these manors belong to the 3rd prince?" Zhou Ying, who had been listening for a while, stood up and asked. No matter what, they were considered to be on the 3rd prince's side, so they couldn't let the 3rd prince's reputation be damaged. Otherwise, their future would definitely not be smooth sailing. Of course, she also had a way out. If the 3rd prince lost, he could just hide in her interspace for a few years. In short, she couldn't let these refugees take advantage of the manor for nothing. Especially when not even a blade of grass would be left in her manor if a precedent were to be set. "Manager Zhou." Bai Jingping looked at her in surprise. Zhou Ying shook her head, looked at the refugees, and asked, "Are you mute? Who said that the manor belongs to the 3rd prince? Even if it's not the 3rd prince's, it's still General Zhou's. They're relatives, to begin with, so what's the difference?" The leader replied. Zhou laughed after hearing this. You seem to understand the matters of the imperial court very well. Then, can I suspect that you are here to ruin the third prince's reputation? Stop intruding, I'm just telling the truth. The truth? Have you seen the title deed? HJH, what, didn't your master tell you? Such a terrible master, he doesn't even know who the owner is and wants a cut. Such incompetency. Shut up, Zhou didn't give him a chance to speak. She suddenly pointed at him and shouted, arrest him. With a great disaster in front of us, he doesn't want to serve the country but instead instigates the people to cause trouble. I suspect he's a spy who has come to sow discord between the ruler and the people of our country. Right, this person's motive is not right. Arrest him. Sun Hongliang immediately chimed in. The refugees were dumbfounded when they heard this. What was going on? Weren't they just demanding some meat to eat? Why did a spy suddenly get involved? This was a crime punishable by death. Bai Jingping understood what Zhou was trying to do. No matter what, once they captured the leader, the other refugees would be much easier to deal with. The easy part was that this person was suspicious, to begin with, so there was no need to be soft-hearted. After thinking it through, he waved his hand at the soldiers. 5 soldiers immediately walked out and pounced on the leader. Seeing this, the leader panicked and immediately used his fists and legs to knock down a soldier. Then, he turned around and fled. However, Gu Qingrui, who was hiding at the side, kicked him back. Immediately, 2 soldiers pounced on him and held him down. Gu Qingrui stepped forward and dislocated the man's jaw, carefully examining the inside of his mouth. Not long after, he pulled something the size of a green bean from his mouth and said, if I'm not wrong, this is a poison that seals the throat at the sight of blood. He's a spy. Take him away. Bai Jingping exclaimed loudly, then looked at the refugees. The refugees no longer cared about meat as they all retreated in fear. At that moment, Brother Peng's fake son pulled an officer aside and pointed at one of the refugees. Seeing this, the man immediately grabbed a refugee and turned to run. However, the other refugees quickly surrounded them tightly. Get out of my way, or don't blame me for being merciless, the man said as he grabbed the hostage by the neck. Chapter 367 Spy 2. Just as he finished his threat, Zhou hit his arm with a slingshot. The man felt the pain and let go. The hostage immediately turned around, kicked him, and ran away. Seeing this, the man opened his mouth and bit down. Shit, he's going to commit suicide, Sun Hongliang shouted. However, it was too late. The man fell with a smile, and black blood quickly flowed out of his 5 senses, which shocked everyone. Another spy. Seeing this, Bai Jingping's head began to ache. He looked at the refugees and said, 111 give you 15 minutes to return and bring out your household registration for an inspection. In addition, you will be rewarded if you report a spy. Of course, if the report is true, you will be rewarded with 50 pounds of noodles. The refugees were dumbfounded, but they were soon elated. 50 pounds of noodles, if eaten sparingly, could totally allow a small family to live for another month. They sized each other up, their eyes full of suspicion and schemes. When Bai Jingping saw this, he told the soldiers beside him, focus on those with lesser family members, especially those who joined after the snowstorm. Catch all those who are suspicious. In addition, keep an eye on these refugees. Capture all those who want to leave the group. Understood, my lord. Don't worry. The leader of the soldiers nodded. Afterward, Bai Jingping and his men carried the 2 spies back to their tent. When he saw Sun Hongliang, he remembered the informant he had mentioned before. He immediately sent 2 soldiers to find Constable Zhang to identify the informants. Finally, his eyes fell on Zhou Ying and her husband. Dr. Gu and Manager Zhou, one have to thank you both for today. Lord Bai, you're too polite. We're doing this for ourselves. Since the matter is settled, we'll be going back now. Gu Qingrui cupped his fists and replied. Wait, Bai Jingping called out to the mother and son from before and said, this mother and son have been drugged with medicine that has muted them. See if you can cure them. After that, he briefly explained the mother and son situation. I'll try. The drug is unknown to me, so it's hard to say whether I can cure it. After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he brought the mother and son outside. He carefully checked their throats and took their pulses. It's nerve damage. It'll take at least a year to recover. Do you know what drug it is? Bai Jingping quickly asked. I can't figure that out for now, we can only slowly rule out the possibilities. Even if they're cured, I'm afraid it's impossible for them to recover completely. At the very least, they'll be left with symptoms such as an inability to speak clearly or stuttering. The woman hugged her son and burst into tears. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui did not know how to calm her down. No one would feel good suffering such an unexpected tragedy for no reason. Soon, the mother and son fainted. Gu Qingrui went forward to check and said, they fainted from hunger, please feed them something. Bai Jingping heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that. He then ordered his men to carry the mother and son into the tent and prepare some gruel for them to eat. When the mother and son woke up, Gu Qingrui took 2 drops of blood from the woman, and the couple went home. Bai Jingping and son Hongliang had a meal together. After the meal, Bai Jingping sent someone to bring the 2 informants and Brother Ping over for interrogation. Unfortunately, although the spy and Brother Ping weren't smart enough, they were stubborn. They did not get anything from Brother Ping, who also died from excessive blood loss. The 2 of them didn't dare question the remaining spy. They tied him up and waited for Constable Zhang to arrive. When it was almost noon, Constable Zhang rushed over. After confirming the identities of the 2 informants, Bai Jingping ordered his men to release them. Constable Zhang, did any of the refugees go to the county? He asked. Chapter 368 Asking around, not at the moment. Oh, but Manager Lu did say that the refugees who went to the village to steal were to be temporarily locked up. Constable Zhang said. Did they say why they are imprisoning the refugees? There are so many of them, and they will need a lot of food. No, he only said that they were temporarily detained. Alright, I got it. Constable Zhang scanned his surroundings and asked in a low voice, after ensuring no one was around, how's life in the village now? I want to collect some dried white potatoes. Do you think it's possible? That depends on how much you are planning to collect. 8 to 10 pounds is no problem, but it's hard to say if it's more. By the way, you can look for Dr. Gu and the village chief. They know more about the situation in the village. Alright, you'll go to Dr. Gus' place then. His family's life is relatively better than the rest of the villagers. Constable Zhang turned around and left, leading his 2 informers and a few police officers into the village. When he reached the entrance of the Gu residence, he told his subordinates to stay outside and walked in by himself. Inside, Gu Qingrui was treating Gu Zi's younger daughter, Lei. Just as he was done applying the medicine, Constable Zhang walked in and saw Gu Zi and her daughter in the house. He blushed and left the room when he saw Gu Zi, who had regained her gentle and calm composure. Sorry, continue on, I'll be back in a while. No worries, Constable Zhang. I've already done with my treatment illness. Gu Qingrui gave Gu Zi a few instructions and then sent the mother and daughter out. When he returned, he beckoned Constable Zhang to sit and asked, "Is there a reason for your visit?" You can say that. Well, there are fewer and fewer noodles left. So, I was thinking of buying some dried sweet potatoes to bring home. Wonder if you can help me ask around in the village. I'll buy them at 20 coppers per pound. How much are you planning to buy? Naturally, the more, the better. There's almost no more food at Master Kong's place. To tell you the truth, the sweet potatoes were planted nearly 2 months late after the snowstorm, so the number of sweet potatoes in the village is not abundant. I can only say that 111 try to ask around, but one can't guarantee anything. I understand. I'll come back the morning after tomorrow. This is the down payment, and I'll add on if it's not enough. Constable Zhang said as he put down 2 taels of silver. Oh, Brother Gu, was that woman your eldest sister, Gu Zi? He asked, rubbing his nose. Gu Qingrui paused for a moment and looked at him suspiciously. Yes, that's my sister. Does she have any intention of remarrying? What do you mean? If I remember correctly, you have a wife, a son, and a daughter. Although my sister is divorced, she will never marry someone and become a concubine. Constable Zhang sighed. Brother, you've misunderstood. I had a wife, but she has always been in poor health. She passed away during the snowstorm when it was too cold for her frail body. There's only my mother and 2 children at home now. I'm so busy every day that I can't even return home, so I want to have someone who can help me take care of my children. Constable Zhang, to put it bluntly, the older of your 2 children is about 10 years old, and the younger one is 6 years old. They can remember their mother clearly. It will be tough for a stepmother to discipline them, possibly leading to complaints. So, you'll have to communicate with your children about this. Ask for their opinions. If they are willing to accept a stepmother, I can help you pass on a message. But I can't guarantee that my elder sister will be willing to remarry. Chapter 369 Staying for lunch. Alright, 111 give you an answer the day after tomorrow when one come to pick up the dried sweet potato. Constable Zhang replied after a moment of contemplation. Honestly, he had never thought about the children's opinions before and had never taken them to heart. After hearing Gu Qingrui say this, he felt that it was necessary to discuss it with his children before making a decision for the sake of the harmony of his family in the future. Okay, please wait a moment. I'll ask my wife to add 2 more dishes, and we'll have a meal together. Gu Qingrui stood up and said. It's okay, a few people are still outside waiting for me. Constable Zhang replied. Just call them in together. If you walk back at this time, you'll be too tired. But it won't be that grand of a meal, so please don't mind the simplicity. Gu Qingrui went straight to the kitchen after he finished speaking. Constable Zhang wanted to chase after him and stop him, but his stomach started growling the moment he stood up. He looked at the bright sun outside and hesitated momentarily before bracing himself and staying. When Gu Qingrui entered the kitchen, Zhou had just finished washing the white sweet potato vines. When she saw him coming in, she looked up and asked, "Who's here again?" I heard a man's voice. It's Constable Zhang. Try to make it simple for lunch, but make sure it's just enough so that they won't half hungry. How many people? Zhou asked. From what he said, there are 7 people, including him. Alright, let's have soup for lunch then. Sure, do as you see fit. Just don't make the meal stand out too much. After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he took the pot of water and returned to the living room. After he left, Zhou hesitated for a moment. She soaked 5 pounds of dried white potato and took out a pound of black noodles. After that, she simply stir-fried the sweet potato vines with beef lard. She then prepared a pot of water and threw the dried sweet potato slices into it. When the white sweet potato was cooked, she threw in some dough dumplings, taking them out once the dough dumplings were cooked. She brought a few large bowls into the living room and confirmed that there were really 7 people. Zhou then returned to the kitchen, took out a large bowl of dough dumplings, and filled it with soup. She put a spoon in and brought it out. Lunch is simple, please don't mind it. How can that be? It's already good to be able to eat such a lovely meal these days. Constable Zhang laughed. The soup is a little hot, so do serve yourselves. Oh, there is still half a pot back in the kitchen if it's not enough. Zhou then turned around and went back to the kitchen. Then, she scooped a bowl of soup for herself and took out a beef bun from her interspace to eat. Halfway through her meal, Gu Qingrui came in with a pot. So fast? Zhou asked in surprise. Yeah, they're all like hungry wolves. Gu Qingrui nodded and left a bowl for her. He served the rest of the soup and left. After the meal, Constable Zhang and the others drank a cup of water and chatted for a while before slowly setting off for the county. On the other hand, Bai Jingping had just put down his bowl of rice when the head of the military soldiers, who had previously checked the household registration, walked in. "Milord, we've already checked everyone. 10 suspicious people have been identified." After he finished, he handed him detailed information on the 10 people. Bai Jingping looked at it and said, "Keep a close eye on them. You've been busy the whole morning, so go and have lunch." "Roger that." The officer responded and turned around to leave. After he left, Bai Jingping began to study the list in his hand seriously. While that was happening, Gu Qingrui visited a few bigger families in the village that had planted sweet potatoes and asked for any potatoes for sale. Of course, apart from the village chief, his old house, and the patriarch, he couldn't collect more. Even with his reputation, he only managed to gather 100 pounds. Chapter 370. The arrival of the army. However, they did collect a lot of dried vegetables. They collected 1 sack from one of the families and 2 from the rest collectively. Finally, they took out 100 pounds of dried white potatoes from their interspace, totaling 200 pounds of white potatoes. The following day, the couple had just finished breakfast when they heard a commotion at the foot of the mountains. They quickly ran out. They saw Tian Zhuang carrying a hoe and walking back from the field. Gu Qingrui asked, "Brother Tian, what's going on at the foot of the mountains? Didn't the manor capture a group of people yesterday? They were clamoring to let them go. Today's matter differs from yesterday's, so it's better if we don't go over. Let's just let the soldiers handle it," Tian Zhuang said. "I see, sorry for bothering you." Gu Qingrui nodded in understanding. In such a disastrous year, even a landlord would not have any surplus grain. Sun Hongliang could not possibly keep them in the manor for nothing. Therefore, it was most likely Bai Jingping's idea, and it was better for them not to get involved. However, since it involved the manor, they did not return home. Instead, they waited to watch the show from a distance. Just as the two sides were about to start fighting, they suddenly heard the sound of people marching. They quickly turned their heads to look at the source of the sound. Soon after, a group of soldiers in military uniforms carrying bundles on their backs marched toward the village at a moderate pace. And looking at the group, there were quite a few of them. "Is the one riding the horse Manager Lu?" Zhou asked. "Yeah, he most likely brought a tear or knockout bomb to the military camp for the third prince. It's nice he's back with these soldiers, as those refugees won't be able to cause any trouble now. That's great. Otherwise, it's not nice living in constant worry every day." Although Bai Jingping and the others did not hear the soldiers coming, they were delighted when they saw them. On the other hand, the faces of the refugees turned ugly, but they didn't dare to make a scene in front of so many soldiers. However, when he thought of military provisions, Bai Jingping's expression immediately changed as he quickly ran to the village entrance to welcome them. When he saw Manager Lu getting off his horse, he asked, "Brother Lu, these soldiers are, Lord Bai, they were sent by the third prince to assist Lord Kong in recruiting soldiers. At the same time, they are to protect the white potatoes. Manager Luke pointed to a young man on a horse and said, "This is a rank 5 minor general, Zhang Ping." "Greetings, General Zhang. I am Bai Jingping, the county magistrate of Yunhe County." Bai Jingping hurriedly stepped forward and introduced himself. "I've long heard of you. Lord Bai is a famous scholar, and you do things swiftly and decisively. I've long admired you. You're too polite. Where do you plan to settle down?" "I heard there is a forest between Xiahe village and Shanghe village, so we plan to set up camp there. I will call people over to help." "No need, we'll do it ourselves." Zhang Ping shook his head, then pointed at the refugees and asked, "Those people are refugees? Why are they making trouble?" Bai Jingping sighed and told him everything that had happened in the past 2 days. "Well, they're afraid those captured refugees will be executed, so they're making a fuss about releasing them." "Why should you let them go? Aren't we recruiting soldiers here? We should just use them to fill the army. With fewer refugees, there will be less instability," Zhang Ping stated. "But, it's not that appropriate," Bai Jingping replied hesitantly. He and Lord Kong had the same idea before, but they were afraid of arousing the public's anger, so they had not decided. Manager Lu thought of the third prince's words and replied tactfully, "We can try. They won't have anything to eat here anyway, they will have food being in the army. So, let's try. Let's try. The sooner we recruit enough people, the sooner you can be at ease. Alright, you guys settle down first. We'll discuss this later." After Bai Jingping finished speaking, he immediately stepped aside, afraid they would mention the matter of army provisions. Chapter 371 Conscription. Fortunately, the other party didn't say anything and left. He heaved a sigh of relief and returned to his camp. Seeing that the refugees had retreated, he informed the soldiers that they could look for Zhang Ping if they had any difficulties before hurriedly returning to the county administration. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui and Zhou Ying were relieved. The next day, the county issued a notice for conscription. Suddenly, the entire county was in an uproar, but it soon calmed down. It became terrifyingly quiet as people started to sign up one after another. Constable Zhang and Bai Jingping had also rushed to Qingshui town. With the cooperation of Constable Zhang and Tian Jingzhong, they went to villages to recruit soldiers. Bai Jingping, on the other hand, returned to the campsite and was in charge of recruiting soldiers for the 3 nearby villages. When he returned, Bai Jingping did not immediately begin his work. Instead, he went to the manor and said to the refugees who had been captured, "Ever since the disaster, the Yunhe County was instructed to deal heavy punishment as instructed by the Dongyang Manor. I think you should have heard of it. With the crime of gathering as robbers, there are only 2 paths for you all. One is to accept the conscription and head to the north for war. The other was to join the county's labor force for half a year. It'll give you 15 minutes to think about it and decide. May first ask what kind of labor work this entails." At this moment, a weak voice asked. "Repair the river and road." Just as Bai Jingping finished his sentence, someone shouted, "We didn't have anything to eat or drink for the past few days. Isn't giving us such heavy work trying to kill us?" "Not really, but you'll definitely suffer. Of course, if you want to eat well, you can accept the conscription. You won't go hungry." Bai Jingping replied. "There's food in the military camp." Yes, the country's current food supply is mainly supplied to the various barracks to ensure our country's safety. The crowd immediately started discussing amongst themselves. Although they felt it was unfair, most knew their situation. Otherwise, if the border was lost and invaders from all sides came in, they would have even worse days. However, Some people were still unwilling and asked, why the discrimination? They should at least give us some soup if there's meat for the soldiers. Discrimination. Bai Jingping scoffed, then continued, they're risking their lives for a living. You can join the army if you're envious. The opportunity is right in front of you. The man immediately shut up. However, with Bai Jingping's words, everyone felt more at ease. Finally, most of them chose to go to the military camp. In any case, they would suffer the threat of death, so they might as well eat their fill. Only a few people who could not let go of their families chose to join the labor force. When Bai Jingping saw this, he immediately led them back to his camp. He then went to the refugee camp and recruited another 100 or more people. As for the 3 villages, Sinan village had 23 people who signed up. 5 from Xiahe village. There were only 3 people from Shanghe village. However, Bai Jingping did not ask for more, as many other places had many more people wanting to join the army. At night, Constable Zhang came to Gu Shengruo's home. Gu Qingruo gestured for him to sit down and said, we've collected a total of 200 pounds of dried white potatoes and 300 pounds of dried vegetables. The dried vegetables can be considered a gift, so the silver you gave is just enough. Constable Zhang nodded and handed him another tael of silver. Thank you so much, Dr. Gu. Otherwise, I would really go hungry. It's not a problem. We're only doing this for your sake. Gu Qingruo stood up after that. Do you want to transport it now? Or let's do it tomorrow morning. 111 Stay at Lord Bei's place for the night. Constable Zhang replied and laughed. Dr. Gu, please help me ask for your sister's opinion. I've already spoken to my 2 children and they've agreed. Chapter 372 Rejection. Alright, I'll go to her soon and let you know tomorrow morning. 111 Leave this to you. You guys go ahead with your work, and I'll return after breakfast tomorrow. Constable Zhang stood up and left after that. After he left, Gu Qingruo turned his head and asked, Babe, do you want to come with me? It's still unknown whether your big sister will agree or not, so you should go by yourself. However, you only need to deliver the news. Don't express your opinions. Yeah, I'll be back soon. Gu Qingruo stood up and left for his sister's house. Gu Zi was surprised to see him at her door so late at night. She invited him into the house and poured him a glass of water. Qingruo, what's the matter? Gu Qingruo nodded and said, Sister, you've met Constable Zhang, right? We've met a few times but never spoken to each other. What is it that could be related to him? Gu Zi asked after she sat down and looked at him in confusion. Right, he's interested in you. He asked me to pass on a message and ask for your opinion. Gu Zi's face turned pale when she understood what he meant. She shook her head and replied, No need. I don't want to get married again in this life. Gu Qingruo saw her facial expression and understood she was most likely traumatized by that Qin bastard. He stood up and said, Sister, there are still many good people in the world. You're not even 30 yet, so I hope you can walk out of it bravely. After he finished speaking, he left. Gu Zi was stunned momentarily before she slumped onto the table and started crying. Her elderly helper, Aunt May, poured her a glass of water. Madam, your health is more important than anything. Aunt May, I'm just feeling troubled. I'll be fine after this. Gu Zi stood up and wiped her tears in embarrassment. You're just too headstrong. If you don't mind me speaking, you don't have to protect your chastity for Lord Qin. You just have to live your own life. If there's a suitable person, you should take a step forward. Otherwise, you won't even have someone to talk to when you're old. You heard what Qingruo said just now. Yes, Mr. Qingruo is right. There are still many good people in the world. Gu Zi hesitated for a moment. To be honest, I'm not avoiding another marriage for that bastard. I'm mainly afraid my 2 children will be wronged, so one don't dare to take this step. There was one more thing that she didn't say out loud: once bitten, twice shy. She was deeply disappointed and even hopeless about marriage and did not want to get married again. However, after living alone for more than a year, she could also see that having a man in the family was necessary. Luckily, her family did not abandon her. Otherwise, she would have been a pile of bones by now. However, her parents and brothers could help her for a while, but not for a lifetime. She could not always trouble her family. It's not easy to get remarried, but you can ask around and contact him. If he's a good person and his family accepts you, that would be great. Honestly, it might not be suitable for the 2 young ladies if you live alone. Didn't you notice that they didn't play with the children in the village much? They've also become much quieter than before. This was especially so for the young miss. Other than practicing her calligraphy in the study room, she would practice needlework and rarely speak. Also, if her family isn't complete, it will be hard when she wants to discuss marriage in the future. Guzi paused, and then she shook her head. Let me think about it. There's no rush. You should rest early, madam. I'll go and see the 2 young ladies. Aunt May turned around and left after that. Chapter 373 Mother God. After Aunt May had left, Guzi sat in the house, unable to return to her senses. She was at a loss for direction in her way of life. She was conflicted about whether she should take the step forward. She was at a loss as to what she should do next. Her 2 daughters were growing, so what would they think of her marrying again? On the other end, after Gu Qingrui returned, he told Zhouing about Guzi's attitude. Babe, what do you think I should tell Constable Zhang? Reject him straight. Just tell him the truth. One think your big sister is more afraid of the idea of marriage itself than she is of getting remarried. No one can help her with this, so let her think about it thoroughly. Everything will be fine when she overcomes this. That's true. All we can do is tell the truth. The rest will depend on whether they are fated to be together. Gu Qingrui nodded in agreement. The next morning, Constable Zhang brought a horse-drawn carriage over. After Gu Qingrui loaded the dried sweet potatoes and vegetables into the carriage, he told Constable Zhang about Guzi's reply. Constable Zhang, my elder sister has been emotionally hurt before, so this matter cannot be rushed. If you can't wait, you should find someone else. Constable Zhang nodded his head firmly. Understand. It's because that Chen fellow has gone too far. Thank you, Brother Gu, he said, patting Gu Shengrui's shoulder. Leave the rest to me. I'd like to give it a try. I'm impressed, but don't push too hard, or I'll be the first to disagree. Don't worry. Alright, I'll be going now. Constable Zhang said his goodbyes and drove the horse carriage off. Stopping at the village entrance, he then rushed to the county with the soldiers and laborers. Afternoon came. After Bai Jingping saw that Zhang Ping was planning to stay behind, he returned to the county after a short exchange. Turning to the refugee camp, most of them were in tears. After all, in such a disastrous year, any family would be at a loss with one fewer strong man in it. After an old woman finished crying in the Mother God temple, her gaze fell on the Mother God statue. She stood up and walked over shakily. She then kneeled and kowtowed 3 times. I beg of you, Mother God. Please save us, the people who are suffering. We really can't take this anymore. Please take pity on us and give us some food. With her leading the way, some other older women immediately followed and knelt, crying and expelling their inner thoughts. Some asked for help, some asked for food, and some asked for their family's safety. Some also hoped that the Ming dynasty would win the war as soon as possible so that their family could come home and reunite. Basically, everyone started crying and begging for help. Is praying to the Mother God really useful? A young man asked suddenly. If it weren't for a Mother God temple here, I would have forgotten about Mother God herself. I'm not sure. I know we should burn incense and pray to Buddha and Guanyin, but I've never seen anyone pray to Mother God. Shut up, you two. How dare you disrespect Mother God? I've heard from my grandmother that when they were fleeing for their lives, they almost starved to death. It was only because of the sudden appearance of a large amount of food in a Mother God temple that they managed to survive. Really? Such a divine miracle? But these disasters have been going on for so long, and there's still no sign of Mother God intervening. Maybe those people's hearts aren't sincere, and Mother God can't hear their prayers. An old woman pointed at the Mother God statue, whose appearance could no longer be seen clearly. Look how dilapidated Mother God's statue has become, and no one is taking care of it. I'm sure most other Mother God temples have already collapsed, let alone getting offerings. How would Mother God hear our request when she's this sad? Does it mean we wasted our prayers? But what if it comes true? As long as we are sincere, I'm sure Mother God will show mercy one day. After some discussion, they began to clean up the statue of the Mother God. Chapter 374. A welcome. After Zhou Ying and her husband sent Constable Zhang off, they locked their door and brought Heir Zhuang to the manor. They began to plant rice seedlings and sweet potatoes in the fields. She also instructed Uncle Nian to slaughter 2 cattle. While waiting for the cattle to be butchered, the couple picked some spinach. She then went to Manager Liu. Uncle Liu, it'll have to trouble you to give these 2 cattle worth of meat to the soldiers outside. It's to welcome them and thank them for protecting us. Manager Liu laughed. Let's go together. But I'm afraid you'll be targeted once you offer some now. I want to believe in the character of the 3rd prince's men. It will be fine as long as they leave us some. Zhou Ying replied. You're pretty generous, but it won't get that exaggerated. You'll just need to send some meat over from time to time. Of course, I won't be asking that you give this meat away for free. General Zhang has military funds, so you just have to offer us a fair price. Thank you for your reminder, Uncle Liu. Zhou Ying nodded. However, she did not go. Instead, she asked Gu Qingrui to go with Manager Liu while she continued to plant seedlings. Gu Qingrui and Manager Liu arrived at the temporary military camp and looked for General Zhang to express their intentions. Zhang Ping was naturally delighted. Although they had brought military rations, it was only grain. The meat was getting pitifully low in quantity, not to mention the vegetables. With these portions of meat and vegetables, they could at least let these soldiers have 2 good meals and make up for the fat they had lost on the way here. General Zhang cupped his fists at Gu Qingrui and said, On behalf of my brothers, I thank you, Brother Gu. You're too kind, and I should be the one thanking you. Otherwise, I'm afraid my manor would not have peaceful days. Gu Qingrui returned the thanks. Protecting the village is also one of our missions. Also, we can't take your offerings for free. I will pay the normal price for the meat and vegetables. Maybe next time. This time is a little token of our appreciation to welcome everyone. But, without waiting for Zhang Ping to finish, Manager Liu advised, since it's Dr. Gus' kind intention, you should accept it. Just think of protecting your meat and rations when you protect the manor from now on. Seeing this, Zhang Ping opened his mouth and nodded, Thank you, Dr. Gu. But this is the only time. We'll pay you the normal price in the future. Sure, we'll charge 20 taels for a cattle and 5 taels for a sheep. As for vegetables, we don't grow much. If we have any extras, we'll give them to you. We can't offer you extras if we don't have any. After hearing Gu Qingrui state the price for his livestock, Zhang Ping was stunned. Of course, it wasn't because it was too expensive, but because it was too cheap. He glanced at Manager Lu and saw his unmoving expression. He knew that Manager Lu was used to hearing these prices. At the same time, he respected Gu Qingrui. It was no wonder that General Zhou and the third prince would protect them so much. Alright, it's a deal then. I'll send someone to the manor to inform you if there's a need. General Zhang can just come to me, as he's usually not in the manor. Alright, we'll take our leave now, Manager Lu cupped his fists and replied. See you later. After Zhang Ping sent them out of the tent, he personally went to the kitchen and ordered them to make a good meal for everyone to nourish their bodies. When they returned home in the evening, Zhou Ying was about to go to the kitchen to cook when Gu Qingrui stopped her and said with a smile, Babe, you've forgotten what day it is today. What day is it? Zhou Ying looked at him in surprise. To be honest, there was no calendar or phone here, so she was a little confused as she didn't know the specific date. Chapter 375 Birthday 1. It's May 18th, and they'll prepare dinner tonight. After you send me into your interspace, you just have a good rest. Gu Qingrui went into the house after that. Zhou Ying finally understood what he meant, and her face turned red as her heart beat faster. She tied Zhuang up and followed him into the house. Gu Qingrui had just finished washing his face. He saw her come in, changed the water for her, and kissed her on the face. What do you want to eat tonight? I'll enter your interspace immediately. You make the decision. Once you've decided, just tell me what ingredients you need, and I'll bring them out. Alright, 111 go and draw up a list. Gu Qingrui turned around and went to the west room. On the other hand, Zhou Ying washed her face and changed into clean clothes. After she was done, Gu Qingrui took out a list and handed it to her. You can choose what you want to eat. Zhou Ying took the list over and looked at it carefully. There was an assortment of Chinese and Western foods on it, and quite a lot of them. She marked down a bowl of cordyceps flour blackbone chicken soup, a steak, a fruit salad, and a small cake after going through the entire list. Gu Qingrui took it and glanced at it. He added a cup of saffron tea and said, It's not good for you to get pregnant at such a timing, sorry for the inconvenience. Zhou Ying smiled and nodded. I understand. Besides, it's good one don't get pregnant now. Are you sure there's nothing else you want? I'll go to the interspace to prepare dinner if there's nothing else. Yeah, nothing else, Zhou Ying affirmed and closed the door. She entered her interspace with him, took out the necessary ingredients and seasonings from the warehouse, and left the interspace. As soon as she came out, she heard Zhuang barking. She quickly opened the door and walked out. When she saw Father Gu standing outside, she approached him and greeted him, Father. Come in for a talk. No need, I'm here for just a few words. I'm mainly here to inform you that your second brother is getting married the day after tomorrow. Remember to be there early. Such a hurry. There's no choice, no one's life is good this year. They're urging us to quicken the marriage, so we'll keep it simple. It will be just our family and a few respected elders in the village there to witness it. In addition, one need to borrow your family's carriage to pick up the bride. Also, see if you can get us a few pounds of meat, as it won't be a feast without meat. Is beef or mutton okay? We don't have anything else to offer. Zhou Ying asked. Sure, 5 pounds each is fine. The chickens we raise are also ready to be eaten. Father Gu replied. Alright, well come with the meat the day after tomorrow. Do come earlier, as Qingrui has to pick up the bride together. Father Gu turned around and left after he finished speaking. After he left, Zhou Ying went to the well to wash her clothes. It was already dark after she returned, so she locked the gates. She then went to the kitchen, made a big dumpling soup with some chicken meatballs, and fed it to Zhuang. When the sky got completely dark, she entered her home, locked the door, and entered her interspace. Gu Qingrui, who had already finished cooking and changed into casual clothes, saw her coming in and spoke with a pout, "You're finally here? I thought you had forgotten about me. I have to wait until it's dark before I come in. You set the food, I'm going to take a shower." Zhou went to her bedroom to get a pair of pajamas and went to the bathroom. When she came out, Gu Qingrui had already laid out dinner, but only the cake was left uncovered. When he saw her, he pulled her to sit down. "Birthday girl, it's your job to blow out the candles." "Well, light it for me then." Zhou cheekily replied after sitting down. "Yes, my princess." Gu Qingrui responded with a smile. He then turned around and lit the 18 candles on the cake one by one, pushing it in front of her. Zhou looked up at him with a smile and asked, "Together?" Chapter 376 Birthday, 2, Together. Gu Qingrui nodded. At the same time, he did not hide the look in his eyes. Other than tenderness and sweetness, only possessiveness remained in them. Zhou was surprised and a little scared at the same time. She lowered her head and blew the candles out. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui also lowered his head and blew on the candles. After he was done, he took out all the candles and handed her a knife. "You're the birthday girl, you cut." After Zhou took the knife, she was about to cut it when Gu Qingrui suddenly walked behind her, held her hand, and they cut the cake together. Feeling his burning body temperature, Zhou stood aside and used a paper tray to take 2 pieces of cake. She gave one to Gu Qingrui and said, "Here, I haven't had cake for a long time, I sure miss it." "Same here." Gu Qingrui took it and nodded in agreement. However, he didn't like eating sweet things and wasn't thinking about the cake. Seeing that she was eating with a blissful look, he also started to eat. After 2 pieces of cake, Zhou put down the paper tray and said, "One shouldn't eat any more cake for now, let's eat dinner first." "Okay, try my steak and see if it's cooked well." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he opened a lid on the side and pushed a plate to her. He then poured her a glass of red wine. Zhou didn't expect him to add 2 cherry tomatoes and a few pieces of pineapple to the side of the beef. It looked very pleasing to the eye. She sat down and took a sip of red wine to get rid of the sweet taste of cream in her mouth. She then tasted the steak slowly before answering, "Your skills have improved. It's tender and juicy, salty and delicious, and the marinating is also flavorful. It's great that you like it. I'll make more for you when I'm free." Gu Qingrui looked up and said. After that, he pushed the salad between them and raised his glass. "Congratulations on growing up." Why do these words sound so awkward? Why does it look like you are happier about my birthday than me? Of course, I'm the biggest beneficiary here. Gu Qingrui smiled and raised his hand to clink her cup. "You wish." Zhou rolled her eyes at him, took a sip, and ignored him. She lowered her head and ate more of the food. After the delicious meal, Gu Qingrui handed her the saffron tea he had prepared earlier. He sat down, propped his chin on his hand, and sized her up thoughtfully. Perhaps it was because of the atmosphere, but he realized she was much more beautiful than usual. There was also a gentleness that only she had, and it made his throat tighten. Zhou smiled and drank the saffron tea. She deliberately said, "You're not full yet, right? Have another piece of cake. The cake isn't as delicious as you. Besides, we'll have black-bone chicken soup for supper later." Gu Qingrui got up and turned around to carry her to the bedroom. The next day, Zhou woke up and looked at the scene in the room. She was stunned momentarily before remembering that they had slept in the interspace and consummated their marriage. She moved slightly, and a sharp pain came from her body as if she had been run over by a car. She couldn't even sit up. Gu Qingrui, you beast, she cursed. Gu Qingrui, busy in the kitchen, heard her curse and laughed. He couldn't be blamed for this. He had been holding it in for several years, so naturally, he went all out when the dam burst. Besides, if he weren't afraid that her body wouldn't be able to take it, he wouldn't have left her any energy to scold him. Nevertheless, he still had to coax her and soothe her mood. He brought a bowl of black-bone chicken soup in and said, "You must be hungry. Have a bowl of soup first. Coming, help me brush my teeth and wash my face." Zhou Ying ordered as she grabbed the pajamas on the side and put them on. Chapter 377 Gu Qingye's Marriage, 1, Coming. Gu Qingrui immediately put the chicken soup aside and helped her brush her teeth and wash her face in the bathroom. After washing up, perhaps because the day had started, Zhou Ying felt she had finally recovered. She turned her head and asked, "Did you cook?" "Yeah. One made millet and red bean porridge, mixed it with 2 side dishes, and fried 2 poached eggs." Gu Qingrui pointed at the black-bone chicken soup and added, "Oh right, you should drink the black-bone chicken soup while I'll serve the rice." After he left, Zhou Ying sat at the head of the bed and drank the chicken soup. The thick chicken soup was without a trace of oil, and she felt the warmth in her stomach. She lowered her head and drank it spoonful by spoonful. After she finished drinking, she walked out slowly with the bowl in her hand and saw that Gu Qingrui had just finished setting up breakfast. After breakfast, the two packed up and left the interspace. "I can go to the manor alone," Gu Qingrui said. "You can rest at home, and I'll come back to cook in the afternoon." "No need. I'll just cook myself a bowl of noodles at noon. You don't have to run back and forth." Zhou Ying shook her head. "All right, be careful at home. You can ask Brother Tian for help if you have any problems." Just as Gu Qingrui was about to leave, Zhou Ying remembered that his father had come over yesterday. She quickly stopped him and told him about Gu Qingye's marriage. "I see. I'll have them butcher a cow and a sheep tomorrow morning." Gu Qingrui replied, closed the door, and rushed to the manor. After he left, Zhou Ying tidied up the house. After feeling all right, she took the quilt, pillow, and other things into her interspace, washed them in her washing machine, and then hung them in the courtyard. After lunch, she locked her doors and returned to her room to sleep. The next morning, after breakfast, the husband and wife each changed into fine cotton clothes. They first drove the carriage to the manor, picking up 10 pounds of beef and mutton each. Of course, on the way, she put half of it into her storage space and took out a piece of beef lard weighing 5 pounds. As soon as the two of them reached the door, Father Gu came over and said, hurry up and clean up the carriage. We have to go and pick up the bride quickly." "All right, I'll do it soon." Gu Qingrui was not hurrying to move even after hearing his father's words. He lifted the curtain and took the basket from Zhou Ying's hand. He took out the meat, handed it to his father, and helped Zhou Ying out of the carriage. Father Gu immediately smiled when he saw the beef, mutton, and lard in the basket. "Today's banquet will go up another level with this meat." "Oh, what's the price of beef and mutton now?" "There's no need. Just treat it as a congratulatory gift from my second brother." Gu Qingrui shook his head. To be honest, they were worried about what gifts to give them. After all, if she gave less, it would reflect badly on their relationship with Father Gu. If she gave more, it would feel bad because they were indirectly gifting Mrs. Liu. Since they had a suitable reason, they were eager to use this as their gift. "All right, that's a matter between you two brothers. I'll go and tell him." Father Gu then walked in with the meat. Afterwards, Mrs. Liu, Mrs. Yao, and the other women cleaned the carriage inside and out. He then tied a red silk cloth around the horse's neck and the carriage door. He also laid a straw mat inside the carriage and placed a stool. Only then was everything done. After that, Mrs. Lu warmly greeted Zhou and said, "Let's go and chit-chat inside." Zhou looked at her smiling face. Her heart was beating, and she didn't know if Mrs. Lu was pleased because her son was getting married or if she had some ulterior motives. However, no matter which, Zhou hoped Mrs. Lu wouldn't find trouble with her. Otherwise, she didn't mind falling out with her. Thinking of this, Zhou nodded with a smile and followed her inside. Chapter 378 Gu Qingye's Wedding, 2. After entering the house and chatting for a while, she found out Mrs. Lu wanted her to be responsible for cooking. Madame Chiao was afraid she would overthink, so she hurriedly said, "You just need to stir-fry the beef and mutton. The rest can be left to them." "Sure, Grandma. Cumin mutton and black pepper beef should be great, what do you think?" Zhou nodded and asked. "No problem. Well, listen to your suggestions. We have 5 tables in total, and you can arrange them as you like." Although Mrs. Lu was somewhat dissatisfied when she heard this, she didn't dare to say anything more for fear that Zhou would not even cook these 2 dishes. Afterward, she went out with Mrs. Yao to set up the table and chairs. Zhou chatted with Madame Chiao and several of her sisters for a while and then went to the kitchen. First, she cut the beef and mutton into small pieces and marinated them in strips. She then heated up and melted the beef lard. When she was done, Mrs. Wang and 6th Aunt Gu also came over to help. However, they only helped to chop the vegetables. Zhou was idle and had nothing to do, so she followed them to join the fun. As soon as she sat down, 6th Aunt Gu looked at her in surprise and said, "Oh wow. Your complexion looks great." There is, indeed, a tinge of pink in her white skin, and her skin appears much more delicate than before. Mrs. Wang echoed. "Maybe it's because I'm in a good mood. With an army guarding the village, I'm at ease and have recently been able to sleep well at night." Zhou froze for a moment, then looked up and replied with a smile. "That's true. I've felt much more at ease with those soldiers these past 2 days. Otherwise, those refugees might come to the village to rob us of our food at any time." 6th Aunt Gu nodded her head. Mrs. Wang nodded in agreement. As for Zhou Ying's complexion, she tossed it to the back of her mind. "By the way, if you have enough money, you can sell the vegetables in your field to the military camp. However, it's best to charge them according to the pre-disaster price so they won't be disgusted." Zhou said. "What about dried vegetables?" Mrs. Wang quickly raised her head and asked. There were a lot of dried vegetables at home. Now that the fresh vegetables in the vegetable field have returned, they no longer fancy eating dried vegetables. It would be best if they could sell them for money. That depends on how well it's preserved. If they're well kept, it'll be great to sell them. However, you'll have to charge them a fair price. If you anger them, it won't be good for us. That's for sure. We won't give them the damp and moldy ones. You guys can go ahead and try selling them, as there's a lack of food everywhere. Dried vegetables can be eaten, isn't that so? Yes, I'll let them know later." Hearing that, 6th Aunt Gu was also tempted. She also had some dried vegetables at home. The key was that there were many vegetables in the field. They would have to use them as fertilizer if they didn't eat them quickly enough. The 3 women chatted on and off as 2 more aunties came, followed by 3 of the more important women from the Qian clan. After that, Gu Ziqiu and her husband and Gu Zishan and her husband came. When the dishes were almost ready, the groom arrived slowly. Mrs. Lu, Mrs. Yao, Mrs. Wang, and 6th Aunt Gu immediately welcomed the people who came with the bride. As soon as the auspicious time arrived, the husband and wife paid their respects to heaven and earth and immediately started the banquet. Salad with white sweet potato vines, steamed dried garlic, and eggplant was first served. Zhou immediately started stir-frying the beef and mutton afterward. The chicken dishes were made by Mrs. Sunday. It was stewed chicken with dried white potatoes, which smelled quite fragrant. There were also 2 stir-fried vegetables, along with a chives omelette. All of the dishes were quite rich in flavor. Zhou did not expect everyone would be given black steamed buns as the staple food. Of course, it was only for a limited number. There was only 1 for each woman and 2 for the men. But this satisfied everyone, especially those from the Yu family who came with the bride. Chapter 379 Gu Qingye's marriage. 3. To gather such a table of food in this disastrous year was truly rare. It also indirectly stated that this marriage was respectful to the Yu family. After the meal, Zhou, Gu Ziqiu, and Gu Zishan went to the new house to see Yu Haitang, the Yu family's eldest daughter, after sending off the happy Yu family members. She had a scholarly air about her in addition to her delicate features. She seemed to be a piece of jade from a humble family, and it was no wonder that Mrs. Liu and Gu Qingye were satisfied with this marriage. After a few polite words, Zhou and Gu Ziqiu left. "Why didn't you bring your children here?" Zhou turned her head and asked Gu Ziqiu. "She is too young. I was afraid she wouldn't be able to withstand the jolts of the journey, so I didn't bring her back." Gu Ziqiu then asked, "Aren't you planning to get any children?" "Let's wait. I'll bear one after the disasters are over." Zhou laughed. She took out a small and exquisite silver lock, about half a tael in size, and handed it to her after that. "It's for the child. I wish her a long and healthy life." "Thank you, on her behalf." Gu Ziqiu took it with a smile. On the other end, Hu Chun found Gu Qingrui and said, "Brother, the wild roses have already grown out these past 2 days. One wonder when we can pick it." "Naturally before the flower bloomed." "How about this? Get someone tomorrow morning to start picking at the location where the plant matured the earliest. I'll teach you how to deal with it after dinner. Also, you have to find some lime powder to make a clean and dry room so that it can be used to preserve the roses." "Understood. There's lime powder in the village. I'll get it when I get back." At this point, Hu Chun hesitated momentarily before asking, "What price do you plan to charge for this flower tea?" "As far as I know, ordinary chrysanthemum tea is sold in bulk at 100 copper per pound. Let's set the price for roses at 100 coppers for now. If they sell well this year, the price will go up. We'll set another price next year. What do you think?" "I can't thank you enough, brother. It's just a win-win situation." Over the next few days, Zhou went to the manor to help, while Gu Qingrui went to Sinan village to help with the roses. At the same time, the village also got busy. Some were planting white potatoes, and others sold white potato seedlings to other villages for 10 copper each. The Gu family had planted plenty of white sweet potatoes last season and made a small profit from selling the seedlings. Of course, the main buyers were their 3 sons-in-laws. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Gu Qingrui came out of Sinan village one day and found that the number of soldiers outside the village had decreased by more than half. He immediately turned around and entered the manor to look for Manager Liu. "Uncle Liu, did General Zhang and the rest leave? Why are there less than half of them here?" "Not really." Manager Liu smiled bitterly and shook his head. "In many places, people are forcibly captured during conscription to be soldiers. Now, the country is plagued with many internal problems. Many refugees are rioting and even taking the opportunity to rebel. That's why General Zhang brought his men to help quell the rebellion." "Rebellion? But why?" All these natural disasters have finally quelled, so why are these people instigating an uprising instead of going home to farm? There must be something to plant if these people want to farm. They should have harvested a batch of sweet potatoes in the south. We gave them so many seeds, some of them were sent to the north as military provisions, so, Gu Qingrui was speechless after hearing this. This was a dead end, no one could do anything about such a riot. Don't tell anyone about this. If anyone asks, just say that we don't need so many people to guard this place. I'm afraid this matter can't be kept a secret. I'll hide it for as long as possible, so keep an eye on the refugees when you return. If there are any changes, let me know. All right then, I'll go back then. Gu Qingrui turned around and went home after that. Chapter 380 Mother God's Manifestation 1. In the evening, Shouing could only sigh silently after hearing the news. At the same time, she began to think about how she could secretly take out some food to calm the chaos. But before she could think of a solution, the refugees on the mountain learned of the news 3 days later. For a moment, there was a ruckus brewing. Gu Qingrui, who had sent children to keep an eye on them, immediately informed Manager Lu when he heard the news. After receiving the news, Manager Lu immediately went to the military camp outside and deployed the remaining 500 soldiers to surround the refugees. What do you mean by this? Can't we even go home? An old man looked at the soldiers armed with swords and immediately demanded. Sure, 111 send them to escort you home. Manager Lu nodded with a smile. If you stay here obediently, you'll be able to live, even though you'll suffer a little. Otherwise, are you sure you're not just delivering human meat back home? When the refugees heard this, they saw the soldiers eyeing them suspiciously, and they all became listless. More than half of their strong labor forces had been gone because of conscription and labor punishment. If there were any more losses, the elders, women, and children wouldn't even have a hope of living. As long as you stay here obediently, Manager Lu continued, we'll do our best to protect you. Otherwise, don't blame us for getting physical. After that, he brought half of the soldiers back, and the rest stayed where they were. What a terrible life. We're eating wild vegetables every day, so much so that we've turned green inside out. How are we going to live any longer? An old woman immediately collapsed to the ground and started wailing. Her cry immediately caused a commotion. However, they didn't know that if Shouing hadn't scattered many wild vegetable seeds on the mountain back then, they wouldn't have even been able to eat wild vegetables. At that time, a young leader who was left behind stepped forward and said, "It's already good enough that you have the wild vegetables on the mountain to keep you alive. The people outside don't even have a leaf to eat. Even we only drink flour paste daily to fill our stomachs. Indeed, this year is not easy for anyone. Everyone must be content with what they have." Immediately, an officer chimed in. When the refugees heard this, they were indignant. They could clearly smell the smell of meat every few days, so how could these soldiers be drinking just flour paste daily? However, after a careful look, these refugees realized that these soldiers were all thin as sticks. Compared to them, they only looked slightly better and had stronger bodies. The refugees were in even more despair. These people were all the third prince's soldiers and were already in such poor conditions. What about the rioters and rebellion outside? They got listless when they thought of the rumors of humans eating humans. A group of superstitious old women began to kowtow to the Mother God in the Mother God temple. At that time, the Mother Goddess statue was much cleaner, but its appearance looked more dilapidated. This action of theirs also caused the elderly and young to do the same. A few old ladies even discussed taking out all their private savings, less than 200 coppers. They went to the town to buy some candles and incense and to offer prayers to the Mother God. They prepared 3 joss sticks daily and didn't dare to stop even once. 3 days later, When Zhou was sleeping in the middle of the night, she suddenly felt her body warm and went into her interspace. However, she soon realized that something was wrong because she realized that she was as light as a feather. She looked down and realized her feet couldn't touch the ground. She floated like a ghost from TV shows. Zhou broke out in a cold sweat. What was going on? Could it be that she was haunted? Chapter 381 Mother God's Manifestation 2. Are you confused? At this moment, a clear and ethereal voice sounded above her head. Zhou immediately looked up and saw a figure that seemed to be about to disappear at any moment in the air, and she looked at her with a kind face. When she saw her dress, she was shocked. She then asked curiously, "Are you Mother God?" "You too." "What do you mean?" "To put it bluntly, I am you, and you are my reincarnation." Zhou was dumbfounded when she heard this. What? She had transmigrated here from the modern era. How did she have anything to do with Mother God? However, when she thought about how similar they looked, she felt they might be related somehow. Thus, she asked curiously, "What's going on? How are we?" "There's too little faith in this era. I don't have time to tell you more, and you should see for yourself." Mother God turned into a stream of light and flew into her forehead. Zhou felt her body fill with power, and a series of memories followed. Only after the first fragments of memory were integrated did she discover that she was the reincarnation of Mother God. She predicted that this continent would experience a destructive disaster about 100 years ago. Later, Mother God traveled through space and time to find a way to resolve the problem. She saw the prosperity of modern times, especially the high-yield crops. About 30 years ago, she left a drop of her blood essence and implanted it in Zhou Ying's mother's body. She also sealed her palace, this interspace, with an entire island in her soul with a teleportation array. Finally, she left a wisp of her soul on the island with the memories of her previous life. Mother God then reincarnated into the modern world. She had planned everything out. When she came over, the people's faith could resurrect that wisp of her soul. After fusing with it, she could use her interspace to stop this catastrophe. Who would have thought that after she had only disappeared for a few decades, the people's faith in her had rapidly declined to the point of none. This was why her plans had been delayed until today. Next came the information about the warehouse. It turned out that the warehouse was more than just a simple warehouse. It had a mapping relationship with each Mother God temple in this world. Not only could she know the people's demands through the warehouse, but she could send stuff through this warehouse to each Mother God temple. Of course, the corresponding Mother God temple must have had people who had faith in her. Otherwise, it would not be connected. She tried to check the rest of the memory fragments but found them inaccessible. Zhou couldn't help but mumble, "This is such a fantasy. I sure didn't expect to encounter such a thing. But why didn't you leave behind any martial arts secrets or the like to give yourself some protection?" She then shook her head and stopped thinking about it. Zhou then walked to outside of the warehouse. As expected, there was a bright spot in the warehouse. She immediately used her telekinesis to check it out and saw the scene inside the Mother God temple. As expected, many people were living in the Mother God temple, which was clean and tidy. There was an incense table in front of the Mother God statue, with incense burning on it. A few small fruits and a bowl of wild vegetable soup were also being offered. After that, she tried using her mental strength to throw the 3 bags of mixed flour Gu Qingruo had ground earlier into the image. As expected, the flour fell directly in front of the incense table. Seeing this, she was overjoyed. This way, she would no longer have to worry about how to provide food aid. At the same time, she felt a little lost. Mother God did not hesitate to reincarnate for the sake of these common people, but they abandoned her. It seemed that she had to teach the people a good lesson. Otherwise, Mother God's sacrifice would not be worth it. Chapter 382 Mother God's Manifestation 3. After thinking it through, Zhou threw in 3 more bags of flour. After ensuring there was enough food for the refugees to eat for 2 days, she left her interspace. After that, she sat up and scanned her surroundings. After confirming she was still alive, she finally fell asleep peacefully. The next day, just as the sun rose, the refugees in the Mother God temple were in an uproar. A few old women ran out happily and kneeled, raising their heads and shouting, "Mother God has manifested, she has manifested." The men, who didn't believe this at first, ran in and saw the 6 bags of flour in the room after seeing their crazy looks. They cried bitterly and kneeled piously, kowtowing repeatedly. As for why they were given mixed flour, no one was in the mood to think about it. They only knew they could finally have a full meal. After a while, the villagers also knew about the manifestation of Mother God. They were skeptical, but when they saw the bags of mixed flour, they finally believed it. When 6th Aunt Gu returned, she said indignantly, "It was originally our village's Mother God temple. One didn't expect it to be taken advantage of by outsiders." "You can't say that." One heard that a few old ladies living in the Mother God temple took out all their private savings and came to town to buy incense for Mother God. Perhaps their sincerity has moved Mother God. Indeed, Mother God temple is right there, but it's been so many years since anyone paid their respects. It's no wonder Mother God didn't care about us. Who said that? One heard that Gu Qingrui and his wife dug up white sweet potato seeds from that mountain. If we didn't have the sweet potatoes, think about what kind of life our village would be living now. That's right. Back then, when the drought was so severe, only our village and a few others next to it could produce water. Isn't this also because of Mother God's protection? In short, after this incident, the villagers pushed all the good days to Mother God, causing their faith in her to rise rapidly. On the other end, after Gu Qingrui received the news, he returned home smiling and told Zhou about it. Zhou looked at his unconcerned look and asked, "Why? Don't you believe it? There are no ghosts or gods in this world." Maybe County Magistrate Kong feared the refugees would rebel, so he took advantage of the night to send them some food. After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he looked at Zhou Ying's expression and asked in surprise, "What's going on? You believe this?" Zhou Ying nodded and told him what had happened last night. She continued, "Do you remember when we lived in the Mother God temple and I had nightmares? I don't think it was a nightmare, but Mother God reminded me. It was just that we didn't understand her back then." Gu Qingrui found it hard to believe, but he knew that Zhou Ying was telling the truth when he saw her serious and firm expression. She had an interspace, and they had transmigrated. What else was impossible? It was just that he didn't want to acknowledge this unconsciously. "Don't think about it anymore. I'm hungry, so let's eat." Zhou Ying took him to the kitchen, and the two ate directly in the kitchen. After the meal, Gu Qingrui only returned to his senses when Zhou Ying was washing the dishes. After that, he hugged Zhou Ying and kissed her fiercely. Finally, he smiled and said, One didn't expect my wife to be the reincarnation of Mother God. How many generations of good fortune have I cultivated to obtain such a great blessing? Silly." Zhou Ying pinched his nose and laughed. Gu Qingrui grabbed her hand. "You must be silly to be part of something this great." Suddenly, he calmed down and asked, "Does it mean you will be immortal? What will you do without me in the future?" Chapter 383 Mother God's Manifestation 4. I don't know. I'll just take it one step at a time. As long as we live each day happily, it's okay. If there is a day when one will live forever, one believe my godly abilities will manifest by that time. At that time, even if you want to die, I'm afraid you won't be able to. Zhou teased. That's true. The world is unpredictable, and we just have to live well in the present. Gu Qingrui nodded in agreement. By the way, we're almost done collecting the wild roses. Remember to prepare 150 taels of silver for me, he reminded Zhou. What do you think about the wild roses? Did you want to store them in the interspace or sell them? I've already sent a letter to the third prince through manager Lu to see if they want it. If they don't, well, save it up. It'll save us the trouble of going back and forth. It's fine as long as you know what you're doing. Zhou gave him a small number of silver notes worth 200 taels. After that, one went to the manor while the other went to Sinan village. They were pulled aside and asked whether they knew about Mother God as soon as they arrived. The two of them nodded to that. As a result, the people of the manor and Sinan village all went to the Mother God temple to look around. Even the soldiers were curious. However, who knew how many of them believed it for real? Regardless, the Mother God temple was lively and bustling. The people in the manor and those in Sinan village even pooled money to buy incense from town. Especially the people of Sinan village. The sweet potatoes and meat they had bought had already been eaten, and they were the same as these disaster refugees, basically relying on wild vegetables to survive. If they could get some food this way, they would be saved. The coffin shop in the town was reopened, and the news of Mother God's manifestation spread. As for the refugees, although they were upset that the news had spread, they had no choice but to move out of the Mother God temple. The Mother God temple was emptied for the people to offer incense and prayers. At noon, Uncle Hu came back from buying incense. He found Hu Chun, who was cultivating the wild roses, and said, "Chun, let's try it. I've already bought the incense." "Uncle, do you really believe that?" Hu Chun looked at him in surprise. "I do. I remember when prayers in the Mother God temple were strong when we were young. I also heard from the elders that salvation would appear every time there was a great disaster in the past, so we must try. Just give it a try. If we can really get food, no matter what it is, our lives will be better. Suppose the children hurt their bodies from starving, it will be too late to make up for it in the future." Gu Qingrui reminded Hu Chun. He hesitated momentarily and continued, "But since you're going, you must be sincere. One heard that the old ladies who lived in the temple had to offer incense 3 times a day and guard it for 3 days before they could get food." Hu Chun hesitated but finally nodded in agreement. As they said, the adults were fine, but the children shouldn't have their futures let down. Therefore, he said to Uncle Hu, "Leave a few people to guard the village and bring the rest. Remember to bring every family, especially the children. Since we'll pay our respects, we must show our greatest sincerity." "All right, I'll gather the people now." Uncle Hu responded, turned around, and ran off with the joss sticks in his hand. After gathering, Hu Chun looked at everyone and said, "I won't force those who don't want to go, but those who go must bring their greatest sincerity. Of course, those going there to watch the fun should not go either. Because we're not going to a temple fair, but a sacred place. This is not a trifling matter, so do you all understand?" "We understand." Everyone immediately nodded. "Let's go." Hu Chun brought his men and solemnly rushed toward Mother God temple. Chapter 384 Mother God's Manifestation 5. When they arrived outside the Mother God's temple, they kneeled down with the villagers and kowtowed 9 times. Finally, they walked to the incense table and lit the joss sticks. Once again, he led the entire village to kowtow 3 more times. Finally, he spoke on behalf of the whole village about their plea for food. The people watching from the side began to mutter when they saw this. They had never seen such a formal request before, comparable to meeting the emperor. Although they couldn't see Faith itself, they could see that rays of sunlight quickly entered the Mother God statue along with the incense smoke. When the manor's tenants heard about the sincerity from Sinan village, the people who were still hesitating immediately gathered together to buy incense and candles. They went to the Mother God temple to burn and offer incense in the evening. At the same time, Manager Lu followed them with a doubtful look and offered 3 incense sticks. Of course, he had asked for food for his 2,000 soldiers. Otherwise, they would not die on the battlefield but from hunger first. At night, when Zhou brought Gu Qingrui to the interspace again, she found that the sky in her interspace had many more colorful and auspicious clouds. What is this? Gu Qingrui asked in surprise. Is it a rainbow? No, the message Mother God left behind said that this small island is fully enclosed. Clouds can't float in, and it's impossible for a rainbow to form here. Moreover, the color of the clouds doesn't look like it's from a rainbow. Zhou shook her head. After that, she probed it with her telekinesis. She didn't expect her mental state to feel comfortable, as if it had been nourished. It even made her feel happy. She couldn't help but be curious about what it was. At this moment, a piece of memory suddenly opened up. It was a sentence that was difficult to understand, and she just read it once to find that her mental energy had begun to absorb the clouds in the sky. She finally understood that what was floating in the sky was not clouds, but faith. Absorbing faith could help her recover her divine power bit by bit. After she understood what it represented, she told Gu Qingrui. Zhou then sat cross-legged on top of the villa and began to absorb the colorful clouds above. After a while, all the colorful clouds were absorbed, and Zhou felt better than ever. She even felt that her strength had increased. After that, she tried punching around. As expected, the punches made a whooshing sound this time, and her moves were smoother than ever. She walked to the front of the warehouse and looked inside, finding it much easier to check the warehouse than before. Finally, Zhou looked at the bright images and saw everything that happened in the Mother God's temple today. The people who used to live in Mother God temple still piously offered incense 3 times a day. There was also Hu Chun, his men, and the people from the manor coming to pray for grain. There were also a few people here and there asking for food. However, she couldn't put all the food in Mother God's temple, or they would fight for food. She tried to find the few old women from before. Finally, she found out that they had already moved to the warehouse at the dock because of the rain. This made her feel pleasantly surprised. However, she also knew it was better to teach a man to fish than to give a man a fish. So this time, after giving them 100 bags of flour, she also gave them a few fish baskets. She found a lot of mud loaches and eels in the river, but most importantly, she found fish. Although they were small, there were a lot of them. Ultimately, she threw about 100 wild ducks through the passage. Once they ate the fish from the river, people would soon find out about the ducks as well. Chapter 385 Mother God's Manifestation, 6. Next was Sinan village. Their village had provided more than half the faith points she got today, so she threw 100 bags of mixed flour and 2,000 eggs. As for her manor, she only gave them 2,000 eggs and 20 bags of mixed flour because they already had sweet potatoes. Although Manager Lu helped light incense for the military camp, it did not generate any faith. So after thinking for a moment, she did not give them anything. As for the other random people, they were only given to those who produced faith points. After she finished her work, the wheat she had planted earlier had ripened. Zhou collected all of them and ground them into a black powder. After grinding, she took out many dried white potato vines and dandelions, mixing them with wheat bran, corn, peanut cakes, and tofu dregs. She proceeded to grind them into a large amount of mixed flour. Gu Qingrui rushed over to help her pick up the bags after she filled them. After they were done, the two sat down on the bags of flour. Are you planning to keep giving flour? Gu Qingrui asked. Yes, I can't let them live too comfortably. If they want to eat good food, they must fight for themselves. All one can do is protect their lives. Otherwise, it'll be bad if they develop a lazy personality. That's true. It's easy to breed laziness if you're too comfortable. It's also easy to breed ungrateful people. The meat in this interspace has been stored for a long time. There's a lot of chicken, duck, and goose in here. Yeah, but let's take it slow. Not only do we have to look at their faith, but we also have to look at their social responsibility and personal character. For example, if the army near the manor generated faith points, I would give them meat. We're kind enough that we don't kill those who ate humans or those with unpardonable crimes. But we won't be letting them off. That's reasonable. Let's hope the white potatoes can spread as far as possible. Zhou Ying shook her head and said, at present, for the seeds to spread around the country naturally. I'm afraid we have to wait for 2 years. So now, I'm just waiting for the third prince to make a move. If he believes in Mother God, we can credit him with spreading the white potato to the masses. She then continued with some pity, if only one could distinguish the good from the bad. Let's take it slow, and I'm sure Mother God can do so. Otherwise, how else could she become a goddess? I hope so. Zhou Ying got up and stretched. Let's go. We should take a shower and go to bed early. Otherwise, you won't be able to wake up tomorrow. Yeah. By the way, I cooked a pot of bird's nest just now, so let's have some before sleeping. Alright, I'm tired after working for so long. Zhou Ying replied and went back to the villa with him. The next day, when everyone saw what was in their houses, they were all overjoyed. Naturally, the news spread quickly. Of course, some people were puzzled. They had clearly paid their respects, so why didn't they receive anything? They began to doubt whether Mother God was fair in handling things. The appearance of such a large amount of food again made Tianjingzhong, County Magistrate Kong, and the other officials realize that this was most likely food given by Mother God herself. Otherwise, it would be impossible for so many things to be delivered to them without anyone noticing. Tianjingzhong went to the dock. When he saw that the refugees were all given mixed flour, he couldn't help but mutter, flour too. Could it be that even Mother God can't afford anything else? Sir, look at the fish baskets here, Mother God also gave them. I wonder what they mean. At this moment, an old man came over with a fish basket. A fish basket. Tianjingzhong took it and looked at it curiously. He didn't expect it to be an ordinary fish basket from the south. Could it be that Mother God wants you guys to fish? He asked the old man. Chapter 386 Mother God's Manifestation 7. Fishing. There are fish in the river. The old man's eyes brightened when he heard that. Although their lives were a little better now that they had flour, filling their stomachs with no meat was still difficult. If there were fish, they could at least have some protein in their diet. Let's go and take a look. When Tianjingzhong heard this, he immediately took a fish basket and followed them outside. When they reached the river, they only found seaweed and no fish. He then thought of something and reluctantly took a biscuit out of his pockets, broke it into pieces, and put it in the fish basket. He then sank the fish basket into the river. At the same time, when Manager Louvre got the news, he first went to the manor tenants and saw them distributing the eggs and noodles. He ran to Sinan village after that. After confirming that something had been given to both of them, he asked Hu Chun in confusion, one also offered incense yesterday, but why didn't one get anything? How did you guys obtain so much food in one go? Hu Chun told him what Gu Qingrui had said the day before, maybe it's because of our sincerity. If one is not sincere, Mother God might not be able to hear their prayers. Also, you don't seem to be lacking in food. I also heard that the manor's tenants also went to pay their respects collectively, and they kowtowed just like us. I heard they didn't get much in return compared to us. Is that so? When Manager Lu heard him say this, he did feel a little guilty. After all, when he paid his respects yesterday, he was skeptical and didn't believe in Mother God at all. I can only think of these two reasons. Hu Chun nodded. At this moment, Gu Qingrui came over with the silver notes and gave them to Hu Chun. Knowing the reason for Manger Liu's visit, he remembered what Zhou had said and nodded in agreement. I think what Hu Chun said makes sense. Why don't you go over and try again? I'll buy some incense now, do you want to come along? Hu Chun asked as he looked at Manager Liu. Let's go. I'll buy some incense first, and we'll talk about the rest later. Manager Liu hesitated for a moment before nodding his head. After that, the two went to town together. When buying incense, he also heard the refugees had obtained a fishing basket and were at the river. He also heard that someone had found wild ducks in the reeds by the river. The two men looked at each other and turned toward the dock on their way back. They happened to bump into Tian Jingzhong with the others and their fish baskets, and they quickly ran over to take a look. There were palm-sized fish in their baskets, as well as mud loaches and eels. It seems like there are quite many mud loaches and eels in this river, Manager Liu commented with a grave expression. This isn't good. These loaches are excellent at digging holes, and it'll be troublesome if it breaks the dam. Indeed, I'm afraid all of their natural predators are dead, and those who aren't dead are probably hiding away. This must be the reason why these loaches are flooding the river. Tian Jingzhong nodded in agreement. He took a fish basket and told the old man among the refugees, "I'll take a fish basket and find someone to make the same one according to this. I'll send it back after they've learned the craft. Feel free to take it. We also know how to make this same basket, but initially, we aren't sure why Mother God gave us this. Now that we know her intentions, we'll go to the mountain and find something to make more baskets." The old man shook his head and replied. Could there be another layer of meaning? Manager Liu asked with a pensive look. What? Tian Jingzhong asked curiously. It's better to teach a man to fish than to give a man a fish. Perhaps Mother God wants people to earn their keep as much as possible and not rely too much on her. Why would you think so? Chapter 387 Mother God's Manifestation 8. Manager Liu pulled him aside and told him about the difference in treatment between the villagers of Sinan village and the manor. Hu Chun, Gu Qingrui, and I came to the conclusion that the manor is not lacking in food at the moment. That's why Mother God didn't give us much. Since fish baskets were given here, I think it should have the intention of letting them earn our keep. Tian Jingzhong nodded in agreement and said, That's true. The entire country, or even the entire continent, is suffering from disasters one after another. If we only rely on the help of Mother God, where would so much food come from? Ultimately, we'll still have to rely on ourselves. He then looked at the incense in Manager Liu's hand and asked in surprise, You don't lack food, what are you offering incense for? I'm not starving to death, but don't forget the soldiers outside the manor. They consume a lot of food every day. Without supplies, they won't be able to hold on much longer. I see. As the saying goes, the emperor never lacks hungry soldiers. Since there's hope now, we can't let them go hungry. Tian Jingzhong nodded in agreement. Wait for me, he added. We'll go together at noon. I'll gather all the village chiefs to pay our respects. Sure, let's go together. Manager Liu immediately understood what he wanted to do. He then went back with Hu Chun to wait for the news. After Hu Chun learned from Manager Lu about the deeper meaning behind the fish baskets, he returned to find Uncle Hu and said, "Uncle, find a few women who know how to hatch eggs and to find those eggs that can be hatched. Well-raised chickens. When the chickens grow, we can have meat and eggs." "I understand, but the feed, it might cost some food from us in the early stages, but we can raise earthworms later to feed the chickens. They will grow quickly. Are you sure it'll work?" "It should be possible. While working as a bodyguard, I heard people in the mountains feed the chickens this way." "Then let's try with half of the eggs." Uncle Hu turned around and went back to work. Conversely, Manager Lu also mentioned raising chickens to the manor's tenants. As for whether they followed his advice or not, he did not care. After resting briefly, he called Chang Shun over and went to the military camp. He called a few group leaders together and told them about Tian Jinghong's plan. "What are you guys thinking? Do you want to go together?" "We would like to go, but we're afraid of embarrassing the third prince." "What's there to be embarrassed about? If it works, not only will you guys get substantial food, but you can also save a lot of money for the third prince. Then let's try. Remember to be sincere. As long as you're sincere, it'll work." "We understand. Either we don't go, or we'll have to show our utmost sincerity when we go." At noon, Zhou was drying the firewood in the courtyard. Suddenly, she heard the sound of gongs and drums and walked out curiously. She saw Tian Jinghong leading a large group of people up the mountains. She couldn't help but mumble inwardly, "It seems like he'll gain a lot of faith today." The village chief and the patriarch looked at each other and asked, "What's the meaning of this? Why didn't they call us?" "I don't know. There's still incense in the ancestral hall, so let's take them and follow." The patriarch answered. "All right, let's hurry up." After that, the two older men quickly brought a lot of their incense and joined the group to pray for food. After Tian Jinghong saw the two of them, he gave them a simple explanation, "But since you're here, let's go together. Don't get your hopes up. Yes, no matter the result, we are still offering our prayers. I believe Mother God will remember this." "Yeah." Tian Jinghong then led everyone to set up an incense table outside the Mother God temple. He placed the offerings and began to worship Mother God. Chapter 388 Mother God's Manifestation 9. At night, after entering her inner space, Zhou immediately saw a large patch of colorful clouds floating in the sky, which delighted her. "Wow!" Gu Qingrui exclaimed. "All right, you get busy while I'll go and do my work." After that, he crossed the river and headed toward the grasslands. After he left, Zhou sat down cross-legged and began absorbing the faith. It took more than an hour to absorb, this time dozens of times longer than yesterday. It seemed that this time, those faiths weren't only from those who were present but also included the villagers' faith, represented by those village chiefs. After finishing her absorption of the faith, Zhou went straight to the storage room and checked out what was going on in the Mother God temple through her little light screen. At this time, Zhou discovered that Tian Jinghong's body had a faint layer of light covering him. She knew this was a glow that was not from the sun reflecting. She looked at the others as well. The others were more or less glowing too, but with different colors. The various assortments of colors included gold, red, black, and even blood red. Suddenly, a piece of information was transmitted into her mind. She quickly understood that these colors were the light of faith, originally white. A golden hue represented virtue, purple was the might of the emperor, red was good luck, black meant bad luck, and the blood red hue meant evil. Only people who had done great evil deeds would have it. Although soldiers killed others, as long as it wasn't for an evil purpose, their bodies would have a golden glow of virtue instead. After she understood what all these meant, she was instantly overjoyed. This way, she could choose who to help in the future. She didn't expect Tian Jingzhong to have the light of virtue. It seemed he had been quite successful as a village constable all these years. Thus, she began to distribute food supplies. First, she distributed 200 bags of black flour and 5 pigs to the military. She gave her village 2,000 eggs. As for the other villages, she distributed according to the number of villagers they had. Each villager was given 100 pounds of flour, which was more or less enough to last until the harvest of white sweet potatoes. At the same time, she had also used her telekinesis to turn the person with the thick, blood-red hue into a retard. She filled up the town warehouse with flour for those people who came from town. As for how much she gave, even she wasn't sure. She also gave Tian Jingzhong and manager Lu 200 pounds of black flour and 100 eggs each. Finally, she placed 20 bags of black flour in the manor, followed by some bran, butter, soybeans, and feed for the cattle and sheep. After finishing, she tried to go up the mountains to see the situation. Alas, she found out that she could only look around the Mother God temple and could not explore any further. She tried the other places, but she couldn't look around either. Only then did she realize she could only follow the faith's origin and not any other places. Thus, she exited the light screen and harvested a batch of white rice, purple rice, and glutinous rice in her fields. Zhou then dehusked these batches of rice and stored them in her warehouse. As for the husks, she crushed them and mixed them with some dandelions, chrysanthemums, and others. This was meant to be feed for the various livestock in her interspace. The next morning, everyone was in an uproar again. At the same time, they also realized Mother God was not biased, she just gave less food to those who needed it less. At the same time, County Magistrate Kong, the first prince's spies, and the 7th son of the Su family also received the news. The 3 immediately reported to their masters, the 3 different princes. At the same time, Manager Lu sent a messenger pigeon to the 3rd prince, telling him that their food supply had been settled for the time being and that he could rest assured. The couple had just woken up when they saw Zhao Qing, Li Xing, and Fang Qing coming to their door with a bag of incense. "Are you here to offer your prayers?" Zhou Ying asked in surprise. After reading the contents of the letter, he did not believe it. This was because he never believed in these enigmatic things at all. Otherwise, where would the souls of so many soldiers be placed after their deaths? Also, why were those evildoers still alive and about? No one seemed to be punishing them. Heartwarming looked at his expression and knew what he was thinking. After contemplating for a moment, he spoke up, saying, "This matter should be taken seriously. Since Uncle Lu sent us a letter, regardless of the methods, someone has been scattering large amounts of grain in Yunhe County. Although mixed flour is a little unpalatable and rough to the stomach, it has won many people's hearts. I'm afraid that someone did it with bad intentions." As he finished speaking, a messenger ran in and reported, "General, County Magistrate Kong from Yunhe County bears news." "Oh, give it to me," the 3rd prince said, curiously extending his hand. The messenger immediately handed him the note respectfully and then quickly left. The 3rd prince opened the note and read it carefully. The small note, with its tiny words, objectively described the manifestation of Mother God. Of course, it also talked about how Mother God treated everyone differently. Finally, he also mentioned that someone who once ate humans went to offer his prayers to the Mother God temple. The person came back retarded. Chapter 390 Mother God's Manifestation, 11. After reading it, he handed the note to Heartwarming and asked, "What do you think of this? Could it be true? If it's man-made, it's impossible the entire town didn't hear anything." Heartwarming answered with disbelief. By the way, he asked hesitantly, I remember my grandmother mentioning Mother God when she was young. Why don't we ask the older generation? Okay, you'll handle this. Remember to find a man worthy of their words and not a woman. The third prince nodded thoughtfully. I will get to it immediately. Heartwarming turned around and left in a hurry. He went to the nearby village and found a village chief and their patriarch to understand the situation. Most of them were also confused. They only knew that the Mother God temple existed, but none had ever heard of Mother God answering anyone's prayers. Only the two elderly clan leaders got excited when they heard this, indicating they had heard of something like it. Thus, Heartwarming brought them to a village near the military camp. He then asked the third prince to come and tell him about his findings. The third prince was shocked, as he didn't think anyone would have really heard of it before. He asked the elders, Tell me what happened? Greetings, my lord. This was something that happened 70 or 80 years ago. We came from the south. We came here with our families after a flood there. I remembered someone saying that a group of us were trapped in the Mother God temple by the flood. Just as they were about to starve to death, they collectively kowtowed to Mother God. Fortunately, Mother God gave them enough food for a month. She gave them rice. That was how that group managed to survive. I've heard similar things from the elders, but in recent years, no matter how much they worship, there's no response from Mother God. This was why no one worships Mother God anymore over the years. So you're saying that every time Mother God responds to her prayers, it's during a great disaster and doesn't usually do that? The third prince asked thoughtfully. I'm not sure about that. We've only heard about it but never seen it. The old man shook his head. Thank you for making this trip. After the third prince heard this, he asked the soldiers to send them back and gave each of them 2 pounds of black flour. At night, after dinner, Heartwarming looked at the third prince's restless look and knew that he was worried. The Great Ming dynasty was currently plagued with internal and external problems, and the flames of war were everywhere. More importantly, cannibalism was becoming more and more rampant. The country might be finished if there was no food to quell this chaos. However, was this rumor of Mother God's manifestation true? If it were true, that would be for the best. If not, then who would be doing this? Would they seize the country after buying over the people's hearts? Why don't I go over there and check it out? Heartwarming asked. The third prince shook his head. There's no need with that many people there. Since they don't have any clue, you won't be of any use even if you go. Then, let's just wait a little longer. Didn't Country Magistrate Kong say he plans to bring the entire county to worship Mother God tomorrow? Well, wait for the results. In addition, send a letter to Manager Liu. Tomorrow night, keep a close eye on all the warehouses in the county. If someone is deceiving us, we'll find out by tomorrow night. Roger that. Do sleep early, my prince. Heartwarming turned around and left after that. He wrote a note to Manager Liu and sent it out by pigeon. When Manager Liu received it, he was surprised. He secretly scolded himself for being careless and immediately arranged for the manpower needed. That's true. The answer will be revealed one day anyway. Heartwarming nodded. After eating the peaches, the couple ground a large amount of mixed flour, just in case. As a result, it was already noon by the time they woke up the next day. The two got up, made a bowl of clear soup noodles, and ate them in the interspace. As soon as they finished eating, they heard the sound of gongs and drums. They immediately opened their doors and looked up at the mountain. Good Lord, look at the number of people standing at the foot of the mountains. It was even more lively than a celebration. From a distance, they could see County Magistrate Kong, Bai Jingping, and the others leading a group of people up the mountains. Alright, we'll probably be busy again tonight, Zhou sighed. I'm here to help. Gu Qingrui smiled and took her hand. Ahem. At this moment, someone coughed. The two turned around and saw Gu Qingye and his wife walking over. Gu Qingye was the one coughing. Second brother, second sister-in-law, the two called out. Hey, do you want to go up the mountain and take a look? Gu Qingye said. There are too many people, and they're all organized by County Magistrate Kong. We're not going. Gu Qingrui shook his head. In the future, I'm sure there will be more coming up the mountains to worship Mother God. What do you think about opening a tea stall at the foot of the mountains? Gu Qingye suddenly asked. Of course you should, but now is not the time. You can choose a piece of land first and prepare now. Gu Qingrui answered.